Hi, friends. Dr. Lewis here, and welcome to the Let Me Hook You Up podcast. This is episode 7. Can you believe that? On this podcast, I chat with friends, and sometimes I do a solo. And in all of that, I hope to share with you certain tips and tricks and just strategies that can help you improve your mental health and your general well being. And sometimes also, our conversations hopefully help you feel like you're not alone, and we share with you things that you feel like you can relate to. Today, I am talking to my good friend, Dr. Tiphani Moss. We attended the same graduate program together. So, when we met to do this podcast and I was setting up, we already got into some good conversations that I didn't want to stop to do an intro. So, this is your intro. Let's go.
I was watching the one with your neighbor on the way over here.
Yeah.
So cool. I related to a lot of what she was sharing about her experience growing up and just like the anxiousness and stuff like that. That has been a weird that's been a weird thing. I related to a lot of it because I haven't done like a full psychological battery, but in February I went to see a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner because I was having a lot of stress and anxiety and depression. I'm always an anxious person, but it was like a lot.
Yeah.
And she was like, I actually think you have ADHD. Yeah, so I don't know. I connected a lot about like what she was sharing and how she was sort of talking about how it presents in women and what that looks like and just like the pressure that's kind of always there.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
It's always weird especially when ADHD comes up and you're like, oh, I did 5 years in school. Like, this is my jam. Like, how do I not know I possibly have ADHD,
Yeah, that I think for me was weird too because I was like, I literally do this for a living. And it never connected for me. So then I'm like questioning myself, like, am I good at my job? Am I missing things from other people? But I think because growing up, we didn't talk about like mental health in my family, even though my dad was a licensed clinical social worker. Like that was it was not a thing. So I just didn't have the language for it. Like even growing up, my mom, I was always an anxious kid, but she thought I just liked being stressed out was sort of her way of describing it. So like, I'm not going to be thinking that I'm having like ADHD. I'm thinking this is stress and anxiety to a significant level, but it's always there. And so that was just, I think that's like a weird thing I'm still trying to integrate since like February, when I met with her. But yeah, I don't know. I started medication recently and that has been helping, but like, because I do this, I also know that like people who don't have ADHD might still benefit from like medication. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel like I can believe it yet, but it's connecting some dots, I think.
Yeah. Well, what about it? Anytime, so I believe it or not, there are people that I would test for ADHD. We actually do the full battery diagnosis with ADHD. We do a feedback session and like, prove to me why I have ADHD. It's like, I don't believe it. It's like, why is it so hard to believe if you do?
Yeah, I think because I've just always been wary of it, and especially given the fact that I've done a lot of these assessments, especially on internship working at the counseling center. We were doing so many assessments, especially after COVID, and then like with TikTok and everything, with all this, everyone has come in and diagnosed themselves with ADHD. So I'm like, I don't got ADHD. Like it's fine, I get it. It's anxiety, but I think it's because growing up, I didn't have problems in school and things like that. Like I was always in the gifted classes and got stuff done on time. I was a procrastinator, but like stuff got done and I was getting all A's. So like there weren't any red flags, and I was the middle kid. I was pretty quiet and pretty introverted. So I didn't draw a lot of attention to myself. So I don't think my parents really would have noticed anything either, aside from I always just had like a very active inner world. Like I cannot shut my brain down. I was never able to sleep. I've had insomnia since 7th grade. Like it is just a thing. And so I thought that was just anxiety or being stressed, because when you're stressed, that can impact so many different things. Like tons of symptoms can be associated with stress based on you as a person. And so that was the language that I heard growing up. And I thought, yeah, stress makes sense. Anxiety makes sense. I am stressed. I'm in grad school. Like, it adds up. So I just was like, no, that's not a thing.
And there's always the the chicken or the egg conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like which came first? Because when you're stressed, it does affect your focus. But also if you can't focus, you will be stressed because, excuse
Yeah.
my language, shit needs to get done,
Yeah, that part.
right? You know,
Yeah.
so for many people, I mean, if you're in gifted classes and stuff, that's code for you don't need to study in earlier grades,
Right.
right? So first grade, second grade, you're winging it, like
Yeah.
you're zoned out, but teacher calls you and like, you look on the board,
Yeah, you can figure it out. Yeah.
you know, so you do okay until you get into those gifted classes because they see that you're gifted, and then now you actually have to study. Like, oh snap! But I don't want to disappoint mom.
Right.
They went through so much to get us here,
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
right? We're not about to screw
not an
this up,
option.
you know. So you can't help it but push, and go above and beyond. You
Right.
know, study way too much than you should for your age at the time because your peers are needing to do that.
Right.
You know, so whenever I am testing folks who are older, especially high functioning, like people who are doing well in their careers,
Yeah.
I remind them like, don't look at the results as much as the symptoms, period, right? So if you're often daydreaming, it doesn't matter that at the end of the semester you got good grades.
Right.
If everything got done last minute, it doesn't matter that it got done. The question is, did you often procrastinate? Not did you often get it done?
That's an interesting way to look at it because I've never actually thought about it from that way. And given my upbringing, the process never mattered. Like my mom's an immigrant. She can't get it done. My dad, they were both in the military, and so we had a very strict upbringing. And it didn't matter what you felt about it. It mattered if you got the task completed, and there were no excuses that would have made it acceptable to not have that thing done. So yes, I was studying a ton, but a lot of the time I was not studying. I was distracted, and so maybe if I'm studying for 6 hours the day before a test, I may be actually getting like 2 hours done because I'm constantly having to reorient myself. But like that piece didn't matter. I got the grade, so and then you go on to the next thing, and that's just how it is.
Right. So you're always stressed because instead of studying for 2 hours, you're studying for 6.
Right.
When others are studying for 2 and relaxing for 4.
Right.
You know, so sometimes that's how it presents. So whenever people say ADHD presents differently in women, it's not so much that it's a whole different set of symptoms as it is, you know, like the set of symptoms and how women tend to accommodate for it.
Yeah, we're socialized a lot different. And
To
so,
figure it out. Like you can't be like the other boy that's just, you know, zoned out and just a boy being a boy.
Oh yeah, no, I figured it out. You should see my Excel sheets, and my calendar is color coded, and there are so many ways that I have figured out how to work around it. So I never thought about like, is there something else here aside from stress and anxiety? Because for me, I always just figured it was anxiety, and that's why I'm so regimented, and I keep 7 alarms to make sure I get to my sessions on time and all that sort of stuff. So it never really was a big question in my brain because I thought like, sure, it's anxiety and I'm doing all these things to manage it.
You know, when we ask questions about impairment, like how these things how the ADHD symptoms impair your functioning, many people, even people in our field, do say, "Oh no, I'm effectively because they're fine. You're getting the stuff done."
Right. Yeah.
Right. But then impairment goes also to cover how much time you're missing in other areas just to accommodate for this.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a 40-hour job and you're needing to work 48, 50 hours just to make up for the 40-hour job because half of the time you're distracted.
Right.
Right. So yes, your job always gets done.
Right.
Maybe you're even getting promotions. But most people do that job in 40. You're needing 60 to keep up with it.
Yeah.
Right. What's accounting for that 20 additional hours? Now, if it's legitimately because I have other responsibilities, I'm a parent, I'm needing to take care of these other things, and that's why I am working extra hours to make up for the time that I was taking care of something else.
Right.
That's a whole different conversation.
Right.
But if it's because you're distracted for 20 out of a possible 60, right? So like I've had so many people, we've done so much testing where we come back and we look at their result, like the way they rated themselves on those rating scales. Like, are you sure about this? Like, you know, you're rating yourself so low when you're coming for ADHD testing means you're dealing with something. So why are you minimizing your own symptoms?
Right. You know, and I think, at least for me, it was because that's what things were like growing up, right? Like I'm figuring things out, and I have been taught to use my brain and figure out
Figure it out.
whatever the thing is. And so for me, it's like, well, yes, it's hard, but ultimately the thing gets finished. And so that's really all that matters at the end of the day. But it's not, obviously we know the process matters, but when you're sort of instinctually focused on only the result being the end game and that's it, like that's what success means, or that's what it meant for us. Like the process didn't really matter that much. It didn't matter how it impacted you. It mattered if you got this thing done on the timeline.
Well, and sometimes too, it almost feels like we don't have the luxury to worry about the process.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
I mean, because if it does matter, then that means if it's not the way it should be, you want to do something about it. Like where's the money to go do something about it?
Exactly.
Where's the time to go do something about it?
Exactly.
You know, because I mean, for some of us, I mean, I didn't grow up here, so it's a whole different conversation. But like, depending on where you are, sometimes you almost feel like you don't belong there to begin with.
Yeah.
So then to go and ask for, hey, I have ADHD, can you give me this accommodation? Like, how dare you?
Yeah, it's like you are already further othered. And for me, because I spent a lot of time growing up in predominantly white classes and spaces and things like that, I was already hyper aware of my difference. So I'm not going to be doing anything to bring attention to that.
Yourself, yeah.
That is not, that just wasn't an option. It didn't feel like that would be smart. It felt like it would be putting another target on your back.
Yeah. And there's also this I think many people have misconceptions about medications and accommodations. You know, already people think you're in certain spaces because you're black. Right. Now if you're taking stimulants and then you're being pulled out and given extra time, you know, it's almost like, is that taken away from my hustle? Like, you're putting so much work to get there. You're not about to let anybody mix it up with, Tiffany's getting all of this because they give her extra time, or because they give her Adderall and they're not giving the rest of us.
Yeah, you don't want that to be invalidated, because it is a lot of work, regardless of like getting accommodations or whatever like support. Sometimes I think people can see that as, well, they had help, they didn't do it on their own, and like we have already worked so hard to get into the spaces that we're into. To jeopardize that and to have people think that we had a pass or we're like getting the easy way out, that doesn't even feel like an option. Like, that doesn't feel tolerable to even to think about.
Yeah. Oof. It's a whole different conversation on its own. Yeah. And I find, so while the likes of TikTok is that double-edged sword for me, right? Because many people would not have known about ADHD and how it presents differently in certain people if it wasn't for spaces like that. Right. And so I think ultimately the responsibility rests on the creators to continue to remind people that ADHD shares its symptoms with so many other things, so that everybody isn't walking into my office saying they have ADHD when it's in fact, anxiety or stuff like that, But I'll take it, to be honest. Like, I would rather people come in for me to tell them, oh, it's not ADHD, it's anxiety. It's not ADHD, it's autism. It's that. Than them not even know that what they're dealing with is not normal. Yeah. Right? There's so many people who have lived their lives thinking, oh, this is how people are. Only to find out per some videos that they relate to on the likes of TikTok that, so no, this is not how life should be. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, especially because, I come from communities that have a good deal of stigma related to like mental health at all. Yeah. I think that I am so grateful for the fact that social media has helped with, I think, trying to reduce some of that stigma. I also think it muddies the waters tremendously when I think it's complicated, right? Because we want people to have the experience, and we're also not here to gatekeep information, right? Like, I know what feels important for us is being able to use our skills and all the knowledge that we've gained to be able to help people, because everyone doesn't have the resources to be able to go to see a psychologist or something like that. And so that feels like an important part. And at the same time, there's a lot of nuance in what we do, and that is why we are trained so rigorously, because you have to be able to parse all those things out, and you miss a lot of that nuance on social media. So someone might think it's something,
you can't get any of that in 90 seconds.
Listen, it's like, or in like a quick post with like a short caption. Like, it doesn't work that way. So I think if it's doing a great job of people being open to considering that there are things out there and there are resources to get help, and that doesn't mean that we all have all 17 of these diagnoses, because like
Right.
how accurate is that? So it
Mhm.
I don't know, it's hard because I know access is important for both of us to being able to give to people,
Yeah.
and if we just give people access to the DSM or whatever, all of our assessment measures, like that's not the only piece of the
Yeah.
picture. So I think it can get a little complicated.
I think it's a piece of the responsibility also, of course, falls back to the person, the client.
Yeah.
Because I do have a 30-minute video on YouTube about ADHD and the symptoms, taking them one after the other, and how they present differently in different people.
Right.
And I have a 20-minute video on the assessment process and what a good assessment involves, etc. Those videos have barely, maybe just about 150, right? And the ones that are just the symptoms on TikTok and stuff like that, those are flying.
Yeah.
And I keep directing people to the long videos. They don't watch that. Then they come to my office, pay all of this money, fill all of these forms, only for me to tell you, no, it's not ADHD. It's like, you would have saved yourself so much if you know, invested in a 30-minute long video.
Exactly.
Like sometimes they don't even have to be that long. So I think it's huge also for people to at least consult one level before, like,
Absolutely.
like see your primary care physician. Even if you do have a therapist, of course, talk to them first and do that before.
Yeah, there are a lot of levels that were skipped. Like we saw like a
people-
15-second clip, and then,
then-
everything else we wanted to seek out. Like we were having confirmation bias of like, oh, this thing I also agree with, so now I have this thing instead of that might be something to ask somebody about. And then like there's a lot of steps we're missing in between.
Yeah. Sometimes so I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and sometimes it's almost annoying when people think it's the easy way out.
Yeah.
Right? There are some people who almost like want to hold on to ADHD because they think that's an easier diagnosis.
Right.
Like, yeah, no, it's not, Tiff.
It's definitely not. It's definitely not.
Like, even when you have the medication and it's doing its bit, it's not.
Right.
So sometimes, like, why are you going out of your way to latch on to ADHD, to latch on to something else, when it's not that? Like, again, this is not to gatekeep or,
not
tell
at all,
anybody
but,
they
like,
don't
it
have what they
doesn't-
have. But it's like,
It doesn't make life easier by any means.
No,
Like
not
we
at
don't need
all.
to be out here collecting diagnoses because it says something about.
Now, if you do have it, then by all means, like, that's why
Absolutely.
consulting and I think people need to make the process more about finding if they in fact do have ADHD.
Right.
Then, then looking for somebody to confirm that they have ADHD.
Right. It's
Right,
about what is going on, not is it. Tell me it's this.
Tell me,
going on.
sometimes it's almost like, tell me it's this, and if the person says it's not, then that person isn't. They don't know what they're talking about, or
Yeah.
they don't know that ADHD presents differently in women, or they don't. People are stuck in their old ways, and
They're invalidating my experience.
it's like it's
It's complicated.
it's like, let's find that balance.
Yeah.
Let's find that balance. Because I mean, on one hand, if we all have ADHD, then your experience isn't that unique anyway.
Right.
It almost like not the levels the playing field. It's like it dilutes the importance of the diagnosis to begin with.
Yeah. Agreed.
So if we're working with the premise that, because I mean, it also annoys me when people say we all have ADHD. We all have a little ADHD, right? I know that's not accurate. Yeah.
Is that the case, really?
So because that's not true,
Right.
I also don't expect you to, like other people to also just latch on to the slightest symptom that they relate to.
Right.
Because then you're effectively confirming that people say, like almost like, feeding into that bias that we all have a little. It's like, oh, I have this too. Like, diagnose me with ADHD. Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too, and like what is the motivation to, and also how do we talk about what is like a normal part of the human experience versus what is like clinically significant. Like I talk about that with patients all the time about like stress and anxiety. Just because you're experiencing some anxiousness or you're stressed out, that doesn't mean I need to go see a therapist for the rest of my life. Because stress and anxiety are common things that we will all experience at points in time, but is it impacting your functioning in a significant way in these areas? Then sure, but that doesn't mean you have to sit in my office for the next 20 years because
Right.
you have stress or anxiety.
And go talk to a psychiatrist and move on from Zoloft to Prozac
All the
to
things.
Xanax and go, outside of how the fact that they should impact, impair your functioning, it should also be beyond what is expected given your experience.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest, in the US, at some points, like, is it really beyond my experience, or like, is it really unreasonable that I'm this anxious?
Right.
Because some of
Does
the
it make
things that
sense?
some of the things that we're seeing, some of the things that are going on in the world, like,
Yeah.
for some, like, it makes sense, like, that you are anxious,
Exactly.
because you're being asked to put in 50-hour weeks to then come home and raise kids, and then to do so much just to keep up with life, So yeah, you're anxious.
And it makes sense. Yeah, these are not
And
like exaggerated responses.
exactly, a therapist cannot necessarily manage the anxiety if you're still pulling out 50-hour weeks in addition to all your other
Yeah.
responsibilities.
Yeah.
You understand? Like, I remember there was this, especially somewhere around 2021, 2022, like, teachers were going through it, in the thick
Yeah.
of COVID, and I had a patient who, was having panic attacks and stuff like that. And upon meeting with them, it's like the new principal they had at the time, almost like the person is out of the reality of whatever everybody else is dealing with, and expecting a certain level of performance. It's like,
Oh, it's really disconnected.
you understand? Like, this person is expecting us to have all of this done, this done, this done, this done, when we can barely figure out the next day if it's going to be virtual or in person.
Right.
So this person is anxious because they're worried they're going to lose their job.
It's because the expectations are unrealistic. It's not because you're experiencing something that you shouldn't be.
You
or that
understand?
This is exaggerated.
So, like, the conversation becomes, I don't think you have generalized this anxiety disorder as much as you probably should get a new job.
Yeah.
Right? So for now, maybe we find ways for it to not be panic attacks.
Right.
Right? But this is not sustainable. Like, you cannot medicate yourself in a way that you continue to keep this job for years. It's not healthy.
Sustainable. Yeah.
It's not a sustainable way of dealing with things, right?
Yeah.
Especially if the setting, because they had, at this point, they had reported, other people had reported this new principal to the district or whatever it is, and nothing was changing. If nothing is changing, you're probably, and you decide to resort to medication therapy, you're probably going to be here every week for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the piece that is a struggle.
If you don't mind,
Oh, yeah.
get this closer to you.
Yeah. Especially because I work a lot with people of color, and so when we're talking about systemic issues like existing in oppressive systems, we can absolutely sit here and talk about some of these things, but I can give you all the CBT skills in the world, and that is not going to change the fact that this is the society and culture and we live in, and these oppressive systems are still going to be there when you get out of my office.
Yeah.
Like, we can talk about it, but those are not things that, like, I can just give you a quick tip and, like, we can go on about our day.
Certain systems need to change, and I think there's a lot of like healing in accepting that it's not a me thing. Like,
Right.
I'm not anxious because I'm overplaying this.
Right.
I'm anxious because this shit sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Right.
too much of the onus put on the individual. Like, this is my responsibility. And, like, some of it, sure, we can manage what we can, but there's a lot of things that are not always within our control, and we have to be able to acknowledge that too, because expecting ourselves to be able to solve all of these things and to fully resolve them is not realistic, and it's also not our work. Like, some of that is
The systems,
stuff.
yeah. And I think that obviously there's a lot of helplessness on that field because you cannot do as much for the system, like, especially on the side of the client.
Yeah.
They can't do as much to change the system. So then it comes down to figuring out a way to work with the system. And I get that, right? But if the idea is, okay, then the system sucks. Let's work together to figure out a way to work with the system. That's a whole different conversation.
Exactly.
Then is something wrong with me? Why can't I work with the system?
Yeah.
And I think, the more people are able to, piece together that it's a systemic issue than a me issue, right? I think the U.S. has, one of the highest rates of mental illness in the world because we're trying to keep up with a system that just isn't working.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the individualistic approach. Like everything is on the individual, and I think also part of that is the part of the isolation, right? Like social support and connectedness is a really important thing and buffers against tons of mental health
People don't realize
experiences. But if we are so focused on the individual and what I can do to succeed and how I'm productive, and we're thinking about ourselves without the context of like who we exist around, or if we even have that support system, that is usually a ton of my work with people, is because that has not been paid attention to at all.
Yeah.
That's a huge part. And I think that sort of speaks to like some of the experience that I had, you know, in school, because a lot of times I felt like, what, is it me? Like,
Yeah.
obviously it's probably me because I'm the only one here that looks like me and who's experiencing these things. But I had to learn to externalize a lot of that. I think one of my coping skills growing up has been internalizing. So if I can just overcome this thing, if I can just work harder, if I can have more willpower and do whatever it is and work twice as hard to get half as much. But at a certain point, that becomes futile, because then you realize I can work as hard as I want to. And if people are committed to seeing me a certain way or not allowing me the access that they give to other people, then there's not anything I can do to change that.
Yeah. Well, and even if eventually you win, at what cost though?
Exactly.
Right. You know, if when you internalize, and you know, you put on yourself to work twice as hard, which I think that's what some people preach. You know, like the system will not give you the same access. So I get it. Like you have to work twice as hard or whatever it is, but it's definitely not sustainable. That's for sure.
Right.
You cannot. I don't care who you are.
Right.
You cannot do that long term, and when you do, something's got to give.
I think that's the piece, though, is that I'm at least hoping like generations coming up are able to recognize that, because that is the working twice as hard to get half as much is like, that is a mantra for like Black American folks. That is like all we hear, and it's all that gets ingrained to us. And I can understand, you know, from the perspective of previous generations, that was how they survived, and they want us to be able to survive. That's what they knew, so that's what they're telling us. And they also might not have had the luxury to stop and consider if this was sustainable. We didn't have time. We had to survive, right? And so I think now we are in different places where we have more options and more flexibility to be able to look at other things, but that is still so deeply ingrained. And it's not like racism has gone away and like all these things, they're still there.
It's not going away anytime soon.
Exactly.
You know, so we have to figure out ways to thrive. So I think we survive. We're just surviving. You know, a few days ago I posted a video about and it goes when we were in Dayton. There was this. I worked at McDonald's part time, you know, and this 16-year-old girl just going off on this customer. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember what it was about. And there was this older Black woman who said, "Come on, girl, stop acting the fool. You're making us look bad." Right? Like, looking back at the time, I part of me probably agreed with the woman at the time, but looking back, it's like, how are we putting it on a 16-year-old to represent us?
Yeah.
Like, a 16-year-old should be able to make mistakes. Like, you know, don't get me wrong. Like, she shouldn't have been going on for the customer or whatever it is and acting a fool, but it shouldn't be on her to represent us.
Right.
Like, she should be allowed to be a 16-year-old who makes mistakes. She should be allowed to be a 16-year-old who's allowed to act a fool. You know, I feel like we sometimes Black, we don't have the luxury of mediocrity.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Like, can I just have an off day? Can I have a bad day? Hell, can I be a mediocre psychologist?
That part. Yeah.
Because there are many mediocre psychologists.
I know, but I think if it's us, then people look at us differently, and I think that has been the challenge, because to your point, little Black kids, we don't get the luxury of being kids, right? And that's not, respectability politics is like ingrained from early. Like, it's so much bigger than just how you act. Like, so much is put onto it to where your actions reflect on all of us.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to carry as a kid, but we do. We don't have a choice.
Yeah. You know, and it always comes down to, when I said earlier, something's got to give, it's what's giving. Is it our families that's giving? Right? Because, I mean, in the immigrant spaces, right? You know, and I have no data to corroborate this. It's more of observational level. Like many fathers don't have great relationships with their kids, right? Because I gotta grind. I have to go grind and work 2, 3, 4 jobs just to keep food on the table, right? I have to work twice as hard, yes, but you're working twice as hard at your job, not at your parenting.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you're working twice as hard to keep some company afloat, but not your relationship with your partner.
Exactly.
You know, so in our bid to grind and work twice as hard to get half as much, what are we losing? Are we losing family? Are we losing family time? Are we losing health, like mental health? You know, because again, something's got to give. Like there's just nature just doesn't allow for you to consistently work 60+ hour weeks and have a great family relationship and have great friendships and have great social connections. There's just not enough time in a day for that.
Yeah, it's where is it getting you and who benefits the most from you doing all that work. Like, yeah, you benefit in some ways because you have financial resources and all of that, but who is benefiting the most? It's usually not us.
No.
It's usually the systems and that, you know, it's a whole cycle.
Yeah. You know, hopefully, and I mean, we're all doing our bits to, I think conversations around self-care is a lot, you know, like we're talking about it more.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm not seeing action. We're talking about it a lot, but I'm not seeing a lot of people actually put it into action, myself included, right? You know, like we talk about burnout all the time, and then we go on and get burned out,
right?
Again, you know, it's like, you know. So I really hope that, you know, as time goes on, that we actually put it into practice and find that balance. I went to Lions pre-K graduation today, and I was talking to the behavior analyst, and I said, like, whenever I'm calm, like I've had a decent day, I'm relaxed, I'm well rested, like he's no issue at all, like he's no trouble. Like when you're well rested, you see your kids as kids. You see them as 5-year-olds. You're able to see him as a kid on the spectrum doing his own thing. You know, when you're tired and burned out and probably upset at something that happened at work, all of a sudden the little thing that he just did, you're losing your mind.
Yeah, it's much bigger.
You know, so yes, we're grinding, but what are we paying for it? Are we paying for it in our parenting skills? Are we, you know, for some people, are you traumatizing your kids just so you can put food on their table?
Right. Is it worth it? And you might be providing in this way, but what are they missing out on? I think that piece is hard. And self-care is something that I'm trying to work on more too. I think that we definitely are having more conversations about it, but I think that sometimes that can also be the trap, because I think sometimes there's this connotation that if I'm not like sitting in a bath like in silence with 17 candles around me, and I'm not doing it right. And it can be much more practical than that, but that's not the message that we see on social media. That's not the glamorous thing that actually helps us to, you know, be able to continue to do the things that we do. So like when I talk about it, I refer to it more as self-preservation in terms than self-care, because we're actually just trying to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and not this like lofty image of like getting spa days and like face mask. And it can be that stuff, but those are not always the things that actually might help us the most.
I find that many times actually just kind of breathe, like pausing and taking a breath. Sometimes for some people that's all you need, because I think you can get into this autopilot space where it's grind. So sometimes just when you hear the conversations about it and you realize, oh, okay, snap, I've been working, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. for like 3 months now. I should probably breathe and sleep in a couple of days and, reconnect with my friends and family. Sometimes that's all you need to kind of recharge and try to stick with that for a while, as opposed to necessarily spa dates and stuff. So because the connotation is that self-care has to be those things, people who either can't afford it monetarily or can't afford it by time almost keep pushing back their self-care. Because I can't afford it yet. But self-care doesn't have to look that way. It can literally be one additional hour of sleep. It can be making sure that once a weekend or so, like once a month even, you're spending time with family. You're actually consciously doing some things to make sure that the grind that is burning you out, you slow it down.
You get to you get to be creative a little bit, I
With-
think.
yeah,
with it.
with your
I think
self-care,
that's something I talk a lot about with folks I work with, but it's also something I'm having to get more adjusted to. I think I'm still a little too close to the grad school experience.
Yeah.
And it takes, I'm guessing, more time than I have had to be able to unravel some of that, but it's still a process, I think, of being able to figure out, like, what does life look like now outside of school and studying for licensing, like all of that stuff.
Oof.
How do you create your life outside of that? Because for me, that's all my life was. I went straight to grad school from undergrad, so I didn't stop. And then I did my postdoc right after I graduated, and then I got licensed last year, and it has been a constant process of going to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that part is it's a challenge to navigate, especially when being successful was like, that was the goal. So like, I've done the thing now, but I don't have a plan for after the thing.
Yeah.
So now I don't know what to do.
That was gonna be my next question, right? Because like everything that you described, straight from undergrad to grad school,
Yeah.
you knock it out in the 5 years that I know the school that we attended. You can do it you can take 7 years altogether to do it. You knocked it out in your 5 years. I think you did your dissertation a year early.
Yeah.
Like you got there's so many of my mates who don't yet have their licensure. You knocked yours out. You have PsyPact. You're licensed to practice in 37 states in the
It's 40,
US.
I think now.
See, in 40 states in the US. So you've hit all of the metrics.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, at what cost? And how do you
Exactly.
balance the praise or the good feeling of hitting those metrics with the potential burnout, with the, okay, I need a break,
Yeah.
because it's a good feeling. Like you've done some shit. Like you
It's gotten me somewhere. I think that is the challenge that I'm still trying to balance, because that was all that I knew, is that you accomplish the thing and then you keep your head down and you go to the next thing. And so there's not necessarily some next thing that I need, or like there's no higher degree I can get after the doctorate. I don't need to go back to school to do that. And so I think that is something that is a challenge for me, that I'm actually having to tell myself to pause and to be able to actually try to appreciate all the work that I did and all the things that I've done. Because for me, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my free time now. So I'm like looking up master's programs and like extra trainings, knowing good and well I don't need to go and get another master's degree. It has always been, what is the next thing? And so it's about also, I think, being able to figure out what is my identity outside of
school.
what I achieve. Like, who am I outside of the things that I can produce and the things that I do for other people and all the accolades that I get. So I think that is a process, and being able to let myself sit with that discomfort is kind of how I'm balancing it, because I don't have a bar or a gauge for that. Like, I'm the first person in my family to have done anything like this, so I don't have a model for this is what it looks like to be able to relax after you've done all the stuff and to sit down. Like, we didn't, celebrating accomplishments was not a thing. You'd like, okay, great, and then you do the next thing. You get right to it the next day. So that's something that I'm still trying to work on. So it's always funny when people ask me, like, what are you doing with your time now? Because I don't know. Like, what are my hobbies? What are the things I actually enjoy doing? So I have to be able to figure that out, because something that I've actually realized is a lot of the things that I tend to like to do are still things that are kind of learning. Like, I like to listen to podcasts, and they're like therapy podcasts or like reading books.
Which is okay, by the way.
Yes.
Like, if you legit like it, by all means.
Yes. And I also need to be able to extract a little bit my identity outside of this thing that I do, which I think sometimes can be hard in this field, because a lot of the traits that I feel like are intrinsic to us lend to us doing
that
well
job,
at this. Like, we are helpers, we are intuitive people, we're really empathic. We're, a lot of us, I think, naturally inquisitive. We're curious. That's why we do all this research and things like that. So it's, I don't know, it's hard to parse out, because those are things I feel like are probably traits that were important before I got to school, but now those are things that I use to survive and to pay my bills. And so it's a different level. But I don't know. I'm not sure what I was expecting this postgraduate experience to look like, but it has not looked however I thought it. I thought it was like, oh, that's the mountaintop, and it is not the mountaintop. Like, you get to the mountaintop and you realize, oh, it's a little tough up here. Like, I don't feel like I was, well equipped for that, and I don't know how I would have been. It's an interesting thing to navigate, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're going to have to chart a course for others coming behind you.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, you're the first in your family to do anything like this. And for the most part, I am the first in my family to do anything like this as well. So who's showing you how to do it?
Exactly.
Nobody. And there are not a lot of people in your space either who have done this. So even outside of the family, how many people in your immediate space, like people people you can pick up the phone and call, like, hey, Doc, how did you navigate this when you got there?
Yeah.
Like you don't know anybody like that.
Exactly.
And you're gonna have to figure it out. Sometimes we figure it out a little bit too late, but we're still young, so hopefully we can figure it out, or some level of it out soon, for ourselves and for our families and the folks that will come behind us.
Yeah. That's how I think about it too.
Yeah. Now let's talk about grad school.
Yeah, grad school. That was a time.
So before grad school, actually, so in my experience, right, people with ADHD, there are two flavors. Right? There are two flavors of people with ADHD. There is the happy-go-lucky, I'll take life as it comes at me person with ADHD who, if they send you a text and it has typos in it, they're like, oh, my bad.
Right.
And correct it. And that's the end of the conversation.
Right.
They're the ones that are always late to work and think it's cute. I mean, not that they think it's cute.
Quirky. Yeah.
So
just how I
people
am.
laugh at,
no big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are talking and yelling in meetings and, everybody thinks, and they keep doing the same things. Right? That's the one direction. And then there are the people who do everything to not look like that.
Yep.
Those are the ones that end up being anxious, depressed, developing things like OCD to keep up insomniacs. Now, typically, the people here tend to be men. The people here tend to be women.
Yeah.
Right? Because society's socialized you to not look like that.
Yeah, that's not going to
Right?
work. Yeah.
So I always tell folks, like, whether it be when you seek treatment, my goal is for you to come to the middle. Because also, the people here, it's not necessarily bad, but oftentimes you underachieve.
Right.
Because if you just live your life with the forgetfulness and the disorganization, at some point it begins to affect things,
yeah.
right? So that's not great either. So they may be happy, somewhat content with life, but they are significantly underachieving.
Yeah.
And these people here too are panic attacks day after day.
Yeah.
So they actually end up achieving really well, like at least on the academic ladder and such.
Right.
But then mental health wise, they're struggling.
Yeah.
So with treatment and stuff like that, we come to the middle ground. And I say this to bring back my experience in graduate school.
Yeah.
Before I got diagnosed and I started seeking treatment, I was this guy.
Okay.
Right? So personally, graduate school was not nearly as hard for me. Because I was just winging it.
I have no idea what that's like.
The first 3 years of graduate school, I winged it.
Yeah.
Because if I can, as much as possible, stay with whatever is talked about in class.
Right. You can get along.
I can write the paper last minute. The one B I got in school was Dr. Winfrey's class. I've forgotten the course title. And it was just such a, I think it was one of those theories classes. It was just such a, just such a specialized area that you couldn't BS your way through it.
Yeah, you had to actually
you had to actually know the information and do the readings to actually pass it. And that was a course that I got to be because I procrastinated. I read the paper last day, the final paper. I kept up with the midterms and weekly stuff. The last paper, I started writing it at 8 p.m. I think it was due the next morning, actually. I started writing it at 8 p.m. the night before. And kept going. It's, at this point, it's like 2 a.m. And I'm done.
Yeah.
So I took a calculator, looked at the points that I have.
Oh, yeah. How much you needed to
score. How much I needed to score to pass the class.
Absolutely.
And I realized I would get at least a B. And I literally ended it one more sentence at exactly where I was at the time.
Oh, yeah. I've done that plenty of times in undergrad.
I'm sure Dr. Winfrey probably read this and realized, like it's like he just stopped.
He just stopped. He said, that's enough.
That's literally what happened. I just stopped. And that was the only course that I feel like kind of challenged me.
Yeah.
Everything else, I could wing it. It made sense. I could wing it. I could,
Yeah, you could sort of like reason through a lot
exactly.
of it. Yeah.
And I feel like I have a lifetime of experience reasoning through things.
Yeah.
You know, so grad school for the most part was smooth until that, and then the assessment competency exam, the ACE.
That was hard for me too. I failed that the first time.
Yeah, that was the very, very first time in my life that I saw failed.
Yeah.
I did this thing that people do on TV. I did this. Like,
right. Am I reading that right?
And looked at it again and said, failed? This was the damn 8-hour thing. I sat down for 8 hours to write this damn thing. And the feedback on there was effectively like, I need to read over my stuff.
Interesting. My experience, I think, was almost the opposite. So I'm sort of the over-controlled direction where I overthink everything because I'm trying to think about every possible scenario and how I will address it, all that sort of stuff. And so when the ACE came up, that was tough because I was at an assessment clinic doing my practicum when we had that. So I know that I know how to write these. It was the time requirement, and because I was so over controlled, I was hyper focused on making sure every sentence is right, and so then I didn't finish in time.
Yeah.
And that was something that completely, I think, shook me for a bit, because that was the first time in my life that I had done something I didn't pass it the first time.
Yeah.
That I didn't succeed or I didn't accomplish the task. And so that was a really hard time.
I failed it. Now, going back to the differences there, I finished my ACE maybe with about 30 minutes to spare. Right? And then failed it because I didn't read over
Fair.
stuff.
Yeah,
right?
and I didn't finish it. I ran out of time.
So it's like going back to grad school. I remember when we're doing the internship applications, right? And at this time, I guess I had been on medication, but like my process has always been like easiest route to it, because I don't have the attention span to go the typical route that others would go, right? So when we're talking about internship applications and such, I was telling folks like it doesn't have to be that difficult.
I cannot relate to that at all.
Yeah, I applied to seven places locally. I got those 7 interviews.
Yeah.
My first choice was OSU because I already done my practicum there the year before, and I matched there. So there are many aspects of my life where it felt easy because I was like I took the easy way out.
Gotcha.
I didn't try to
Path
match
of
at
least
this
resistance.
Exactly. I didn't try to match at high level internships that I had no connection to, because it was like I didn't apply to the Harvards of this world to try to go be Dr. Nifty and go do my internship at a Harvard Medical School. None of that. The place that I'm doing my practicum now, they like me there.
This works.
Let me apply that. Stuff like that.
Right.
And I guess it worked.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's the case for many people who go that route of least resistance and taking the shortcut and being the funny guy, or being the one that's always late to things. The one that's somewhat of annoyance, like everybody's little brother sort of thing. That's a part of these people.
Right.
So my hope is, that folks get to the middle ground.
Yeah.
But let's bring it all the way back, I guess. So this is my experience in graduate school.
Yeah.
How was graduate school for you?
Ooh, in a word, traumatic.
Yeah.
Grad school for me was really difficult. So I think, for some context, growing up was a pretty challenging time for me. But I was really close with my mom growing up. And so right before I started grad school, my mom moved away. And we were military growing up, so we've always kind of been in pockets of places where we didn't have an extended family or social support around. So my mom was that for me. And she moved away. So I'm starting grad school feeling like basically by myself, isolated. And then I show up to orientation, and I'm the only one that looks like me. I'm the only visible minority in my cohort. And so I think that wasn't like incredibly uncommon from some of my experiences in undergrad, like working in the behavioral neuroscience labs and things like that. But that is a challenging experience to go through day in and day out, because that first semester when we're taking all those classes, we were like 3 times the amount of full time for grad school. These are the people that you're seeing day in and out, and there's really not much time for everything else. you go home and then you're doing homework for whatever that is. So every day I'm seeing people where no one looks like me, no one has the experiences that I have. I'm already feeling isolated. I am someone who is pretty high strung and anxious already, so I'm already very aware of how I'm being perceived, and because I'm the only one that looks like me, also feels a lot of pressure to perform well and to do well, because if I'm the only one that's not doing well, maybe that feels like they have even more reason to not have let me in the first place. Like maybe it was a fluke and like I'm actually not supposed to be here, because there's no way that I'm the only black person that is qualified. So what is it? Like it was a really challenging experience, and there were several times where I didn't think I was going to finish, and I didn't want to, particularly in the second year, where I was looking at like, what can I do with a master's degree? Like how can I get out of this? Because it doesn't feel sustainable. It felt like it was costing me so much mentally and emotionally that it didn't feel like it was
worth it.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was worth it. I have times like now I still am too close to the experience to feel like it was worth it yet. I am very glad that I did it and that I finished, because getting a doctorate was always something I wanted to do since I was a kid. That has always been a thing for me. So I am so glad that I accomplished that. But it cost me a lot, and looking back, I don't know if I would do that again. That was a challenging experience, especially because you know how diversity is such an important focus of our program. So we're talking about that all the time in all the classes. And so we're in diversity classes, we're talking about police brutality, and people say things, right? I think the challenge that I had is that it oftentimes felt like, for my other cohort mates, the discussions that we would have about identities and diversity was an academic exercise, right? Like this was a learning experience, and they could just close that book and put
be
that
done
down
with it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I cannot do that. I can't take off this skin. I still got to go out here. Like this is not a learning exercise for me. This is my lived experience.
That's for you. It's life.
And so it oftentimes felt like they were learning from my experience at my expense. So people would say things that are insensitive or racist or all kinds of microaggressions, and I have to be the calm black person, because you can't be the angry black woman. You have to be the calm person to explain why they did that and to educate them and to teach them, when I'm also a student who was supposed to be here learning next to you, instead of feeling like you have to learn those things at my expense. Like that is just and then COVID happened when I was in grad school, and with Black Lives Matter and all of that, it was just it was a really tough experience. I remember we went a week after George Floyd was killed, and nothing was said from the administration at all. So I took the liberty of compiling all kinds of resources to be able to send to people, things that people can do, causes to be able to donate to contribute to, literature to learn, to be able to have conversations with their patients. Like a lot of that stuff that I feel like I shouldn't have had to do
as a student,
but I wouldn't have felt right not saying anything. That was, I think, the first time that I felt angry. Like it has been a challenging program, but I was angry and I didn't really know what to do with that anger. So the way that I did that was doing things like that. I set up like spaces, like safe spaces for students where we could all sort of talk and process, because we were also isolated because of COVID. We hadn't seen each other. And then, you know, we had talked about how to put together a letter to talk to the administration about our feelings and what we were hoping for, and that was not received well. And it was just
I'm vaguely remembering this because I was on internship at the time. I think I remember the fracas of it all.
It was I don't know, I think a challenging thing, because I also felt hyper aware of the fact that even though I am doing this and we're writing this letter, I'm the only one that looks like me, and we're talking about issues that distinctly impact me. So it's pretty easy to put a target on my back and be like, maybe Tiphani has something to do with this. And I think that at that point I was so angry I didn't care, like whatever they did. I don't know. I think that part was also challenging for me too, because growing up and being someone who looks like I look in white spaces, anger is not something that people tolerate well from people that look like me. I went hard in the other direction. Like, that was sort of the way that I coped with things, was by trying to be very helpful and accommodating and understanding and all the things. And so anger was not really an emotion that I often let myself access, because if I do that, then what happens?
Let's stay there for a minute, because I think sometimes people underestimate how much, Black people and other minorities have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, because you can't risk it not going well.
Exactly.
So sometimes you go all the way the other direction and be people pleasing, and because you want to be helpful, you want to be liked. And so when I moved here, there were so many times I heard, "Oh, you're not like the other people. You're not like the other Black people. Or you speak English, or you're not like the other Africans. Like, you're not like the other, like, And at the time, it sounded like a compliment, right? Because I'm new in this country.
Yeah.
People like me. They, they're treating me well. They're being respectful. Well, that's because I'm going. I don't know that it's because, but I'm going above and beyond just to keep up.
Right.
And then they're praising that. So that's what I'm going to do. And there's no way that I'm going to risk jeopardizing that by
not ruffling any feathers here.
Exactly, having a reaction, being angry, or even having an opinion that vaguely contradicts the popular opinion.
Yeah,
and that can be exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. I think that for me, that had been how I survived, basically, right? So I think in undergrad, I did a lot of like unpaid research assistants and like research assistantships in behavioral neuroscience labs, because that's what my concentration is in, and usually was the only Black person or person of color in those spaces. And so I learned how I get ahead and how I survive is by shape-shifting into whatever gap they have open and showing them that I am useful to them. Right? Like, I can fill these spaces. I can do what you need me to do.
Yeah.
And so you don't do that by being angry. You do that by being over-accommodating, going above and beyond, being extra and super helpful, all that sort of stuff. So that was how I survived. That's how I got into grad school. I wouldn't have gotten into grad school if I didn't have all those research assistant experiences, and you had to do certain things to get those experiences and to show yourself as one of the good ones, right? It's almost like a lot of times I felt othered, but in that way, it was sort of othered and put on a pedestal,
right?
Kind of like, oh, she's one of the good ones. Like, I can say this around her, and like, she's not gonna get upset. She's gonna educate me instead of like being angry. But like, why shouldn't I be angry? Why would that be a problem if I'm angry, if you're saying something like that? But that's not how I learned to be able to navigate these things. So it wasn't something that I felt like I could really access until then in grad school. And then I stopped caring about that because, well, you already let me in here and you shouldn't have done that. And now it is what it is. And that's where I am. Like, you shouldn't have let me get this degree, and now I have it. So I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes we even do it to each other, right? So when you eventually decide, okay, I'm tired of this shit, I'm going to say something.
Right.
The other people that look like you, like,
you sure?
It's like, sis, you sure about that, bro? You sure about that? And it's like, I get you. I get what you're saying. Because it's your experience too, right? Because you know about this. But it's like, how long are we just going to be the good ones? And again, it goes back to the privilege of mediocrity. Like, can we also have bad days? I mean, to be angry is not even a bad thing. Like, if the thing is annoying, I need to be able to express the anger that I feel. But it's like, I don't know that this is going to go well.
Yeah, that's not a level of authenticity that I often accessed, right? Like, there was only a certain level that I felt comfortable letting people in those spaces in, or only a certain level of my emotions or my actual thoughts and feelings that I would share, because some of the other things felt like, I don't know, that's probably not a good idea. And because I am so in my brain about all the possible responses and how I need to respond to those things, I am very aware of just how bad this can go in 17 different ways. And then what am I going to do after that? So that is just not something that felt worth it to me, before that.
Yeah. Now, actually, it's just clicking for me that really, not that you're making it up or anything. Like your year, you were the only, because my year was 5 of us: me, Mo, Janelle, Lashonda, Jillian,
After you, I think, was 2.
Riaja, and
And
McKinney.
Jazzy.
McKinney
McKinney was after me. Yeah, so
Okay,
then it was
okay.
me. And then the year after was McKinney and Anthony and Cassie. And then they also had like a ton of people of color in that cohort. I think there was like maybe 7 to 10 total people of color in that cohort, which I feel like they kind of course corrected in the other direction because we had the site stuff. I feel like that was a strategic thing, but that's just me. I don't have any evidence to back that up. I just think accreditation is a thing that is important, and we talk a lot about diversity, so it would make sense to have a lot of people with diverse identities when we have people coming over for visits. Yeah. I don't know anything. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just a hypothesis.
It's a valid hypothesis. But like, so bringing it back to like, so the fact that there was 5 of us, I feel like we had, I mean, this was my experience at least, we had our space.
Yeah.
Like me and Mo,
yeah,
we would go on and strategize how to get through grad school.
Right.
I remember Mo having this conversation and said, Lou, let's just get this degree and get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like, there were times when I felt like we had to, this one time, it was Dr. Jackson's class, we were doing this project, and you remember, I don't know if you took that class, it was, I forgot the title of the class.
Sure.
We had to do a project, it was 2 of us, and we were doing our project, and, of course, I'm not going to mention any names, but we were supposed to have a meeting, and I lived in Columbus at the time. I think Lan had been born, so I couldn't.
Yeah.
If we didn't have a class, it didn't make sense for me to go over there
all the way down there.
for this meeting. So Mo was going to represent both of us, and the person we were going to meet was livid that I wasn't there because I wasn't taking the course seriously enough.
Oh, like the consultation? Was it consultation?
Yeah. Yes, that.
I
wasn't taking the project seriously enough, and I told Mo, like, what, screw this, I'm not doing it.
Right.
Like, if this person is not going to let you be, I'm not making the trip just for that.
Right.
Let's find a different person to consult. Mo said, bro. He gave me the look like, bro. Mo said, bro, I know it's a long drive. Let's find a time that works. This is the one thing. Let's just do it and be done with this, because if we have to go look for somebody else, and also you have to also keep in mind that if we don't do this, then this person now has like, something like, oh, because I gave them feedback, they didn't take it. Right. What does that also look like? So it's
exhausting.
Like, you understand,
Yeah.
So I had to kind of clean up my poker face and effectively apologize for missing it, and then go have the consultation, do it, see it through. We did all of that, but I'm saying that to say I had Mo.
Yeah.
Right. There were several times when Lashonda was in my corner. This was my person, Jillian and Janelle. We would hang out together, and when we do things with AWIP. At the time, also in Darrell and Ernest and Stephanie and Danielle.
Yeah, in the cohort before.
Their cohort as well had like and Albin. So 5 people is also as well. Right. So I feel like we had a small tribe there, but you came in, just you.
Just me.
Oh, man, I'm so
Just me.
sorry.
Just me.
Oh,
No, it was really hard, right? Because I didn't have that. So I had people in my cohort that I was close to, but it was only to an extent, right?
Yeah.
Because they might understand my experience as a woman or as a younger person, but this is a large part of my identity and how I show up and how people perceive me. And so they could only understand me to that
extent.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been like that a lot too, because even in, like my personal life with my close friends, they understand part of this experience, but the part of school and all of that, being a psychologist, that's a pretty big part of my life too. And so we get it to an extent. It's oftentimes me feeling like I'm in between lots of spaces.
There's nowhere that's like almost like you 80% even belong in a group of people that understand or can relate to 80% of you.
Right.
Because there's nobody that hits.
Right. Hits all these different things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost like the higher you go, the
Lonelier it gets. The fewer of us there
that's the
are.
word. The higher you go, the lonelier it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the way to put it. You know, the higher you go, the you look around, it's like, just me.
Yeah, there's 3 of us up here. Like,
You know,
out of
You know,
all these
it's
people.
just me.
Yeah.
Because one of the other, so for my cohort, having 5 of us like in the class,
Yeah.
while we're talking about things, we almost can look at each other and have sneak looks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sneak looks at each other, and we see each other,
Right.
even if other people don't necessarily see us. Like,
Right.
so I can't imagine like you having to do it all by yourself, But on the surface, at least, looked like you had it together.
Well, I have a good poker face. That's sort of.
Yeah.
I think that's the part of the internalizing is I can present a certain way, but there was always something going on underneath. But it was hearing about your experience made me think about. Do you remember in our very first multicultural lab where we did that exercise where we put like our salient identities on yeah, and like we had to go up into the front of the class and talk about what this identity was and the things that we never wanted to hear again.
Yeah.
And I'm the only person standing up here by myself. And that was a challenge for me, even though one of the professors for that class was Black. And so I felt like, at least come up here with me. Like,
Right.
you see, it's just me. Help me. But it was so many experiences that felt like that.
Yeah.
Like there's a spotlight on the fact that I am different and that I don't have anyone here who can fully understand what my experience is.
Yeah. No, it's tough. It must have been tough.
Yeah.
And I remember when you were doing, I still don't know why you did that. When you were doing your dissertation a year early. Mm-hmm. It's like, why? Why did you
I can tell you exactly when I realized I was going to do that. So during our first year, during PD, we had Dr. Meyer come in and she was talking about like dissertations and stuff like that. And sort of, she put the timeline backwards and said, a lot of the folks who are in their 4th year are trying to get their dissertations done and they're stressed because they're trying to apply to internships and do all the stuff. And they got a lot going on. I was like, oh, it does sound like a lot. I don't know if I want to be feeling that at that point. So she kind of walked back the timeline of these are all the steps that you need to have done by the time you get here.
So you don't stress like those people.
Exactly, to avoid the stress. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this early. And I'm going to do extra as much as possible so I can get this done early. So I defended my prospectus like fall of 2nd year. So maybe like a year earlier or something like that. And then started my dissertation, like the data collection early, which was a whole thing in itself because my dissertation was looking at, I was very specific about only wanting to have participants who identified as Black women because that was what my study was on. And so I wanted that to be very specific so that the recommendations are based on their lived experience and not just like me guessing, what they actually feel like is helpful, especially because of the topic related to health psychology. But I had to throw out about 30% of my data. And so that I had to spend a whole nother semester collecting data because I had tons of people who took my study that did not identify as a Black woman, even though at every point and at several points in the study, it was clearly stated this is only for Black women. And so that was a whole thing in itself. It put me behind the editor that edits our dissertations and things. When I talked about that part in my dissertation, kind of said things to the effect of like, you're making a big deal about this. Like, why do we need to spend this, paragraph talking about that effect that people did that? Why is that so important? That doesn't, really connect to your dissertation or what you need to be spending time on. Which is a wild thing to me. Yeah. But okay, go off, I guess. That's actually a pretty significant thing that people would infiltrate a space that was particularly set up for Black women who already have so few opportunities to have a voice in the literature. There are so few of us here to do this work and to give that opportunity intentionally and to have that space infiltrated by people who don't identify that way.
Like, what would motivate somebody to do a survey? Because I reckon like these are not like the graduate school. These surveys are in like 3-minute things. Like, why would you
They were extensive, and
why
they
would
were
you do
like
an extensive survey if you don't meet the identity metrics
Right.
that are being asked about.
And there were extended, like there were narrative questions too that you have to answer based on your identity. My guess is that maybe they did it for course credit, or maybe there are some folks, because there were people from all identities, white folks, Latino folks, Asian, lots of folks from different identities who, participated. So maybe it was for the course credit. Maybe
Got
it was because they might not identify as a black woman, but do identify as someone with minoritized identities. And
You felt-
this feels like the closest space. So I'm going
Right.
to take that space maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that is something that is, I don't know. I think the suggestion of like, stop making a big deal out of it feels a bit insidious. Like,
Yeah.
why would I not address that? And the identity variables of you telling me as one person in my cohort who is doing this research, and a small percentage of us in this field to begin
Yeah.
with are black, you're continuing to tell me that I need to stop taking up space in the way that I'm taking it, which is a message I have heard
Oh, yeah.
so often. So like, yeah, that's why I was like, you know what, at this point, I don't care. Like, I am here. I got the degree. I got the license. There is only so much shucking and jiving I'm gonna do anymore. Like, I had to like fit into the boxes to get here. But there is a certain level of access and resource that we are afforded, and that we are privileged to have once we get here. And so I'm like fully me now. It is what it is. I'm not bending to fit into spaces anymore.
Yeah, that's the way to go. And it's also, when you get to this point, then also there's its own pressure.
Yeah.
Because now you have to do certain things almost to pave way for others. Like, you can't, at least for me, it's almost like I don't have the luxury to just be one other psychologist.
Right.
Like...
Yeah, that's the piece that I grapple with. Like, sometimes I just want to be able to be a mediocre psychologist. Like, I don't want to have to be out here being the superhero black person that's doing all the stuff because I got to this level. Like, why do I have to continue to be special and unique and to like, get all the accolades? And like, why can't we just be regular?
Yeah. When I started my job, as the assessment person in my job, like, our reports were all of like 2 pages, our ADHD testing reports.
Really?
Guess how many pages they are now? Now that I'm the one doing it. Oh, it's not a whole lot. It's just like 6, 7.
8? Okay,
No,
that's,
just
sure.
6, 7, and if it's pretty straightforward, it's 5 pages, right? And a piece of that is because I need to defend my name.
Right.
I don't have the luxury of a 2-page report that...
Them taking your word for it.
If somebody scrutinizes this, I can't be the black psychologist that did a shoddy job.
Right. Right.
So I have to make sure that if I say you have ADHD, like, I put in everything that says...
all the evidence,
that says
all the receipts.
that I got. I have to bring the receipts.
Yeah, people don't believe you just off the strength of you getting this,
Like, I have...
accolades.
I don't think I've told anybody this yet outside of Lawrence yet. I have literally had somebody call our office to call me this dumb African man. Right? And this was even after the 5-page report that said they don't have ADHD. Right? Now, so you can only imagine if it was a 1-page report that they could go show to anybody else who would probably agree that, oh, yeah, they did a shoddy job.
Wow.
You understand? So it's like, you do all of this work to get here, and you have to do so much more.
Still not good enough.
Just to maintain your name. It's like...
Yeah.
And sometimes almost like... It's like you're making like your experience, like, why are you making a big deal out of this? I was like, bitch, because you don't have to live it.
Exactly. You don't know what that's like.
It's not your lived experience. And if I'm telling you about my lived experience,
right,
don't Shannon Sharp me.
Yeah. I don't... That piece is weird too, because I think that we never get the benefit of the doubt in the way that some other people, once you get to this level, get. And that part is like infuriating, right? Because you're in school, you did thousands and thousands of hours of work to get here, that should give you something, right? Like,
Yeah.
people should be like, okay, I respect this person as the expert and the professional because we are experts at what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're black, people still see us a certain way, and then we still don't get that. We still have to show and prove and give receipts and documents and all the stuff because we can't give anyone a reason to question.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you know, it's like, is this how it's always going to be? I hope not.
Right.
I hope not, you know, but yeah, we'll see. I think as more and more people like us get into the field and normalize it, right? Then, I mean, if you come in and like you're the psychologist at this stage, the psychologist at that stage, the psychologist at this other stage, who all did great jobs, right? Look like me, then I don't have to prove myself to you anymore because I'm not the one different one. You understand? You know, so I think hopefully as honestly, I don't know if more and more people are coming in. Percentage wise, I think it's still the same.
Yeah.
Right? You know, like with social media,
like-
we're seeing more people, but I don't think the numbers wise.
I think it's still about the same. What is it, like 4% of?
Yeah, I mean, if you make it black male psychologists, we're unicorns.
Yeah.
You know, so hopefully as time goes on, more people actually come in. So the percentage wise, because when more people do look like you in the space, it makes it normal, and then you don't have the need to always be proving yourself.
Yeah. I think, well, and I think it depends too. I think even in that, there's sort of like an out that people will have because there will always be someone who maybe doesn't go to the level that we're going to. And then if people find one instance of that, they can be like, oh, well, they didn't do that, so you might not be that good either. It's that piece, but I also think that the concern I have is the system is systemic. Like, it's working how they want it to, and you have to be in a pretty privileged, you know, scenario to be able to not work full time, to be able to go to school full time, and then to do practicums where you don't really get paid. You have to pay all this money just to go to school, and then to take the licensing exam, to take the EAAP, all that stuff to, you know, renew your license, SIPAC, like all of these things cost a lot, not even just financially, but also what they require of you.
Yeah.
They cost you a lot. And so I think that I really hope that there are more people like us who are coming in here, but I think that it's hard for people to, because you have to have so much privilege and access to even get to this point. And I feel like sometimes in regard to the system, that can be intentional. Like, it's working the way they set it up.
Yeah. So again, friends, I am sure you are enjoying the show, and I am sorry that we have to end it here. During recording, we had a technical hitch that meant that the last 15 to 20 minutes or so, I was unable to salvage. But I promise I will bring Dr. Moss back. Next time it will most likely be virtual, but I'll bring Dr. Moss back for us to have some good conversations that you can enjoy and learn from. But I do wish that whatever we have talked about was something that you felt you could relate to and know that you're not alone in the day-to-day struggles that you're having. If you're currently in graduate school, I wish you the absolute best. And what Dr. Moss said to tell you is to find your people. Find a space where you can just be and not feel like you have to perform if that's available. And, you know, keep trudging along. You know, but I also do believe that if you do feel that the program you're in isn't a good fit, you know, don't feel too badly if you need to find a different path or a different program. I wish you all the absolute best, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.